So this video is going to be about how to sleep out of your car. All these techniques are something that I do. This is not like something I read in a book or anything. I just want to say that I guess it's like first and foremost. So here's the car that I'm, obviously traveling around in. You've probably seen a bunch of videos in terms of like, my tour and everything. But I want to do this video about how I actually sleep in it and the logistics. In about a weekish, I'm going to be filming another video on like the top places that I park for sleeping. So this video is going to be more of like the actual aspect of once you find a place to park, what to do. Before I get into that, I guess to back up a little bit, I do want to say this, and this is like a huge debate about, when it comes to sleeping in your car, is the aspect of looking obvious but covered, and less obvious but not covered. And I'll kind of get to that. Also, the second thing I want to say before I begin, like, kind of the logistical part of sleeping in your car, is just the fact that once you park, don't ever get out of your car. And this is kind of like a little bit of a debate I saw when I checked out some like car living forums and things like that. And the big debate was, are you better off parking your car, or like having your car parked and going into your car, shutting the door, and then passing out? Or are you better off driving somewhere, parking, and then not getting out of your car and just passing out right then and there? And I'm telling you, after doing both and doing a ton of research and everything, you're way better off, even if that means you're only going one block over, you're way better off getting into your car, driving somewhere else, and then parking your car and passing out. Because if you think about it from like a psychological aspect, if someone sees a car pull up and stop, they're going to assume that the car's probably going to be there for a certain period of time, as opposed to if someone sees someone, let's say, get into a car or whatever, and then they don't see the car leave, it looks a lot more sketchy that the car for some reason hasn't left. And granted, yes, people go to their cars to grab things all the time, or maybe even to like sit and do whatever you have to do, but for the most part, you're way better off driving somewhere and then parking your car. So, just want to say that as a first and foremost, there's two different ideas. So now we're going to go to how I actually do it. So, this is also the way the car looks. I'm going to give you the tour around it, just in case you haven't seen it yet. So, this is the Ford Transit, by the way. So, the only way you can really see it is through the front windshield and the passenger and driver's side windows. As you can see, the entire thing is paneled up. So obviously, if you have a sedan and you're looking to try to sleep in your car or live out of your car, it's gonna be a little more tricky, but I can still give you like a bunch of different tips of advice and everything. So I'm gonna put this here. Okay, so the first thing you can see, and even though this is on video, it's so pretty prevalent and in like real life, I guess, or in person, because sometimes the video can be a little bit misleading, but as you can see here, you can notice a glare. So that's one thing I want to say is that there's a, what is it called? A avoiding defense mechanism called projection. The idea of projection is that you think someone else can see you doing something. So for example, like if you have like a small zit under your forehead or something, you think everybody can see it when in actuality people probably might not even notice it, or they might notice it but not even think anything of it. Likewise, when you're living out of your car, a lot of times you might be like, oh my god, someone can easily see me, but usually that's not the case. I'm not saying that isn't the case, but that's something to just keep in mind, that people, if you think about, even when you're parking in like a pretty popular neighborhood, people are walking by looking into cars. So what you really have to do is just protect the certain angles that people might kind of glance into, not like someone's going to go to your car and look really intensely into it to see if you're sleeping or something, but if someone just walks by. So you don't have to be like, everything completely boarded up, no way to see in it at all. So now the first thing I do is I use a screen cover. You can do this just about anywhere. I'm actually going to move this back and I'll show you. I have a link below if you want to get one. I mean, to be honest, they're really only like $5 or $6, so they're really cheap. So I have mine here, and it looks like this, obviously, and these do obviously two different things to you. One is the idea of it, which is basically that it keeps, the sunlight from not getting in your car, so your car stays a lot cooler. This actually is very useful if you're sleeping in your car or if you want to take a nap during the day. Second thing though is this gives you a huge excuse to cover your front windshield, which is the biggest, I guess the easiest way for someone to see in your car that you're sleeping. Especially because the way my car is set up, and I'll show you the inside in a bit, the bed is right there, which is behind the passenger side seat. So if someone stands here and I'm sleeping, it still may be tough for them to see, but it's a lot easier for them to see them sleeping in here from this angle than from anywhere else. So the first thing we do is put this in here, and I'll show you. So from this angle now, you can see that it's very tough to see in here at all. And plus, the biggest thing is it doesn't look sketchy. When looking at this, there's not anything that really jumps out that someone's like sleeping out their car or living in their car either. It just looks like, something normal. Even at nighttime, if you park your car and then put it up, most people don't look at it as sketchy at all, because if you think about it, like the next morning, there's probably going to be sunlight, obviously. So, the next morning when sunlight hits it, it's kind of like preparing for the next day. So don't ever be afraid of any time putting it in. The only thing I'm going to stress is that if you're parking in a parking garage, obviously if you're parked in the middle of a parking garage where there's no sunlight, not even anywhere close, and you put this up, it's going to look really weird and might draw attention to your car. So when I'm parking in a parking garage, I always park in the outskirts of the parking garage, and I put this up because when I park in the outskirts, it's obviously facing, it's facing outside, so sunlight can hit my car. So it looks a little more, it's more understandable to somebody of why this is going to be up, as opposed to if I park in the middle and this is up, they're like, why would this be up when there's no sunlight? So this is something to keep in mind. So that's the front. Now from the sides, I'll show you what I do. Now this is where, so if you have a sedan, obviously, that's going to cover your front. Also, I'll say if you have a sedan, you can obviously use this for the back too. So if you obviously have obviously the rear view mirror or the rear view windshield, you could put another one of these up, and that's what I used to do too. And that actually worked really well because most cars, I've seen a lot of cars actually have both of them, just to completely get them out. Now for the sides, a couple different ideas. This here. Now the first thing is you can see, obviously there's a glare here too, and so the sides is a lot harder for someone to see that someone is living out of that you're living out of your car. First thing, I do have these. I don't use them, and I'll kind of explain why in a little bit. Is that you can put I do have them somewhere. A second. Basically, they allow you to cover your side windshield. So this is called like a sunshade. This was like I think $5 to $10 on Amazon. So it's like this, and basically they're full of things you can put right here, so you can get sunlight, or you can cover sunlight coming in from the sides. That's a very great way for you to kind of hide this side angle, especially because I said before, unless you're making a lot of noise or doing something really, really bizarre, no one's probably going to go to your car and go like this to see if you're living out of it. It's more just they're going to be walking by, and if they glance and see something that looks really sketchy, it might draw more attention. So these will cover enough distance to do that. The reason why I don't have these up is more just because I need to be able to see out of these two different side windows, especially when driving, because I don't have a rear view mirror. So I actually don't put these up. But they're still useful. So the way I could do this now is, if you think about this, 3 different angles that someone could see out of this specific car. They can see this way, so diagonally in, this way, diagonally in from the other, from the driver's window, and then in the front. So in the front's covered. So the first thing I do, turn inside the car. So it looks like this. Now obviously my bed's right there, and that's going to come, and that's going to be very important in a little bit, and I'll explain why. So the first thing I do is have a suit there, as you can see. This is not something that's really weird. Also, people hang up their suits and, business clothes all the time. If you have a sedan, when I used to have the Honda Civic and I'd sleep out of it, that's actually the thing I would use. I'd put, a bunch of collared shirts or a bunch of business shirts in both the left and right window, because it doesn't look abnormal to have something like this in there. And this jumps back way to the beginning of the video, which I was saying, it's kind of like a catch-22, where it's like, if you use something that, let's say, cover your windows, like let's say you use like a towel to cover your windows, that's probably the best thing to cover your windows completely, like no one can see in. However, it might be bittersweet because it may drive more attention in your car, because it's not normal that people have a towel hanging up. Maybe there's some situations, but likewise, if you have like a bunch of business suits, it may be a little bit more revealing. Like if someone goes to your car, they can see through the cracks of the suits or whatever. But at the same time, it doesn't look sketchy, because that's what most people do, is they have, clothes hanging up. So I have this hanging up here, and what I do is, instead of having it like this, I have it like this. So that way, if someone sees through here diagonally, this part is covering their diagonal vision. Alright, so that's the first thing I do there. The second thing, put this up, is I do have a towel hanging up. So I have a towel anyway, even though, yes, I said before that it might sometimes look a little bit more sketchy, but from my perspective here, unless you go really, really deep inside, especially during the nighttime, which you won't even be sleeping in your car, you can't really see that it's, you know, like a red towel unless you really, really look close. So from an outside perspective, that area just looks kind of like blacked out. So you're not sure exactly what's there. It just kind of looks like, you know, dark. So you can't see anything diagonally. Now, also, if I stand up on my tippy toes and look inward like this, I can see cracks, like a crack of, like my bed and everything between the seats, and I'll get to that in a second. But for the most part, that's the main idea. So I'm going to go around. So this is how it looks, obviously, going around. So you can't see diagonally. All you can really see, even from this angle, you can't really see it's that, you know, just darkness for the most part. Then I have my sun cover to cover the aspect. And then from this angle, I have my suit covering, you know, the other side. And obviously, as I said before, there is a glare, so that also helps you out too. Now, the only thing I'm going to say as in terms of a logistic of actual sleeping, besides the obvious, obviously, let me back this up a little bit. Obviously, you know, you don't want to make a lot of noise. Obviously, you don't want to be moving around a lot so the car shakes and looks kind of weird. So little things like that. So jumping back to what I said before in the beginning too about making sure that once you park your car, you don't leave it. Have everything done you need to do before that. So if you want to brush your teeth, if you want to get something quick to eat, if you want to, you know, have some water with you, or whatever the case is, make sure you get all that stuff done and all your errands completed before you park your car. I mean, you can obviously always get up and leave again and do something if you forgot you did something, but it's just a lot easier to get everything done. You know, almost have like a checklist at the end of the day. And then once you complete everything, go and find a parking spot and, you know, park the car wherever. And like I said before, obviously in a weekish time, I'd say I'll probably do like a video on how to find a parking spot. So assuming you've already found a parking spot, I'll just for this video. Now, the last thing I'm going to say is, when it comes to your bed, now this is for this car example, I'll kind of give you an aspect of what I did with the Sedan. But for this car, I just got this towel right now. This this blanket, by far the most comfortable blanket on the planet, by the way. So I just want to say that, it's just pretty cool. But as you can see, it's a dark color. I suggest having either like a dark green, dark blue, dark red, or black is preferable, because you don't want to have a very bright color that someone could possibly see from the windows, especially if you have a Sedan. Second thing, and this really sucks if it's warm out, so definitely use your discretion, is from these diagonal angles, the only way someone can really see in now is from the bottom parts of my seat, so they can see from either side right here, this area, especially from that angle. Actually, from this angle, not so much. From this angle, you're just going to see my stuff over here if you're really, really looking close, but even still, it just looks like I have boxes and whatnot. From that angle, you can clearly see this bottom area. So when I'm sleeping, I always have my head here. That's the first thing. And I always make sure that if my feet are all the way at the end, my feet are covered by the blanket. Because the blanket's dark enough that at nighttime, it just looks like black. But like say if the blanket's like this, and I have one foot sticking out here a couple feet, and someone sees one of my feet, you know, sticking out of the blanket, that's something kind of weird. So that's something to just keep in mind, that from the angles of where people can see in from your car, just to make sure that the blanket or whatever you have is covering you. Because the most obvious thing, honestly, that someone can tell that you're sleeping and living out of your car is them seeing you in it late at night, you know, passed out or whatever. So that's the way I live out of the Transit. That's really all my main techniques. In terms of the Sedan, I'll kind of like give it as like a quick recap. See, I'll just put this here. So, in terms of the Sedan, this is what I did. It's a lot more difficult, but so this was obviously covered from the back. I then had the back rear view mirror covered. From the two front sides, it was really tough to figure that out, and that kind of comes back to, you know, example, like should you use a towel that's a lot more obvious, you know, as opposed to this, a lot more obvious, but at the same time it's going to cover you, and vice versa. Because sometimes, you know, if you see a towel covering like a window of a car, that screams that you're living in it or sleeping in it, usually. Not always, but usually. Just something to keep in mind. What I did when I was living out the Sedan, and this actually did work better than I thought, is I would go in my trunk, and it was actually a lot more comfortable than it sounds. But I go in my trunk, and I take my back seats and fold them down. So basically, you know, like say for like skis or a long piece of wood, and you want to put your back seats down, so you can lay it like out long. That's what I did. My back seats would go all the way down. At that point, I'd lay a mat on top of that. So I'd literally sleep half in the trunk, half of me would be my back seat. And then I'd have a pillow, obviously, and my face and my body would be, my head would be basically on the ends of the backs of the back seats, if that makes sense. Quick side note, you always want your head to be a higher point. So like, say if you're sleeping even, obviously it's no big deal. If you're sleeping on an incline, make sure your head is at the top and your legs at the bottom. You do not want your head to be at the bottom because all the blood's going to rush to your head while sleeping, and you wake up with like a splitting headache. So especially if you have to park on like a hill or something, just keep that in mind. So with the sedan, obviously, I make sure that my head is on the top of my back seats because at a slight incline, and my feet obviously be in my trunk. It's a little more risky, obviously, with the sedan because obviously it's a lot easier to see in. But I said before, what I do is I'll have this covered, have the back covered by, you know, another one of these, and then from the side angles, I just have a lot of business suits to cover each side, and you can either do them in a row horizontally, but obviously it's a lot harder, or have them, you know, say vertically, but completely like wide open, similar to how this looks from this angle. And that way no one can see from your side. So really the only way someone can see that you're sitting in your car is from this angle. And there's different ways to cover that. I mean, you could obviously get a box and act like you have boxes like in your car and cut out a side in the box and put your head in the box. So it's going to be kind of a little bit weird and uncomfortable, very tight spacing. But you can really have your head in a box and it just looks like, you know, a normal box and no one can see anything. That's one technique. Another technique I use is if it was really cold out, I'll just have the blankets over me, and as long as the blankets are dark enough, it's not going to look as obvious. But the thing sometimes I just actually just sleep in the car and it won't be a big deal. So that's the way I do it with the sedan. But you know, I just want to give you my techniques for the Transit. But that's really the easiest way to do it, to be honest, is make sure all your angles are covered. The sun visors are usually the best, especially with the sedan. The ones I showed you before that I'm not using, the front sides. Those are really good for like blocking out, you know, any diagonal views of someone being able to see in your car. And then obviously the last thing is make sure just like your body's completely covered by the blanket, so like no one can see any like feet or head or hands or whatever the case is. But other than that, you know, that's definitely the way to sleep in your car in terms of the logistics of it. And about a weekish time, I'm going to be posting the video of, you know, how to find a spot to be able to look out of your car and everything. So I hope you guys like the video, and stay tuned for next week for that video.